Okay, we have had an executive session since the last meeting for purposes of a personnel discussion. And now at this point, I would like to open up the floor to communication from citizens. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to address the board, please raise your hand to be recognized. If there is anybody on Zoom, please click the raise hand button to be recognized. All right, seeing none, we will move on to our engineering reports. Diana?
Good evening. There is nothing to add to the report that was submitted. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Quick and easy. John, civil engineering report.
Good evening. I also do not have anything to add to my report, and if you have any questions on it, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, John. All right, next we have our consent agenda, items A through C.
Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items A through C.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimous. Next, we have bids, proposals, contracts, and agreements. The first is authorization for Township Manager to execute York County Community Foundation grant agreement for Rockburn Park Rehabilitation Project in the amount of $10,000.
Mr. Chairman, I would move for authorization for the Township Manager to execute the York County Community Foundation grant agreement for Rockburn Park Rehabilitation Project in the amount of $10,000.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimous. I was looking for lips to move up on the screen. Next, we have authorization for Chairman and Township Manager to execute Commonwealth Financing Authority local share grant contract for police radios in an amount of $293,324.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Carries unanimous. Next, we have authorization to purchase 2026 ODB Extreme Leaf Vac from Stevenson Equipment Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $304,713.54. PA CoStar's contract as listed.
Mr. Chairman, this is.
So moved.
Never mind.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Carries unanimous. Authorization to award bid to Thomas H. Klingon Electrical Services for Springersbury Township Park Upgrades Project in an amount not to exceed $2,041,384.65.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Carries unanimous. Authorization to advertise bids for farming lease contract at the wastewater treatment facility.
Mr. Chairman, I move for authorization to advertise the bids for the farming lease contract at the wastewater treatment facility.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Carries unanimous. Authorization to advertise bids for Rockburn Park Improvements Project.
Mr. Chairman, I move to authorize bids for the Rockburn project.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Carries unanimous. Next, we have subdivisions and land development, SD 2023-0002, Druck Valley Road subdivision preliminary plan. Beacon of Druck Valley Road LLC.
Good evening to the Board of Commissioners, or Board of Supervisors, sorry about that, not first-class township, but be it as it may, the Township Board of Supervisors have seen this plan before. They have come in front of the Board of Supervisors a few months back, and they have now submitted a revised subdivision plan for your consideration. We do have representatives from Montrose Environmental tonight, and their legal counsel is also present, and they will be providing some context to what changes were made from what you had seen a couple months back. And you obviously have the review letters from First Capital Engineering, as well as the plan summary that was prepared for you as well by township staff. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to the consultants and their legal counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Heilman. Stacy McNeil here on behalf of the applicant, here with Mr. Dan Wright from Montrose Environmental, and Dan Thornton, our traffic consultant, as well as the applicant's representatives this evening. As an initial point, we did provide to the township earlier today, and we're hoping for the supervisors who aren't available to be present in person today, that was provided electronically, a letter with some documentation that we may be reviewing here today. It's all documentation and discussions that we've had previously with your staff, but just for purposes of the supervisors. So I also have paper copies if any of the board members would prefer to have this in paper.
So let me understand, there's
Yep.
new submission for tonight that we have not had an opportunity to review.
That's not correct. This is a summarization of documentation and discussions that we have had with your staff over the previous 2 years, but most specifically over the past 2 months, as well as a correction of some of the information that was in the review letter and the staff plan summary that was submitted to the supervisors for this meeting.
So we have seen this summarization before.
No, you have not seen this
Okay,
summarization
that was my
before.
question. Thank you for taking so long to answer it.
Absolutely. Want to be sure to be thorough.
Thank you.
So and unfortunately, I do not have the benefit of having been at the prior township meetings. So obviously, I was relayed to me secondhand the conversations and the input from the supervisors that occurred, but we have had conversations and meetings with staff since that time to discuss the primary 2 areas of modifications that were being requested related to this plan. And so the first one, and Mr. Wright will likely come up here and be talking with me a little bit about this, but I want to talk about the changes to the plan that have been made and the new modification request that would result in the need of not needing the previously requested waivers related to access for this plan. So one change that has been made to this plan since the board last saw it is that there has been a full roadway that has been designed to be constructed that will connect the east side and the west side of the development. This roadway, as you can see on this exhibit, which was previously provided to the township and discussed at length with your staff, here we go, will allow a full circulation through the development. Might do better if I'm, here we go. So that at any time, you can come in, you can come through the development, you can come this way. If this is blocked, you can come through the development this way. If this is blocked, you can come up this way. If something is blocked here, you can come down and around this way. And this all functions as a full loop through the development. This leads only this small area right here that does not have full circulation through the development. However, as was discussed before, there is still an emergency access here at what is currently Radio Road. Now, with a modification, a small modification to the township's definition of through street, this does become a through street. With that modification, and this being a through street, you do in fact have 2 points of ingress and egress to this development, and these cul-de-sacs all meet the required lengths under the township ordinance. Further discussions that we had with your staff is that I know that there was concern about the gate and Knox box, whether they function properly or not. They're used throughout the county, but if it's not the township's preference to have that, there are multiple different options for restricting emergency accesses. And as was discussed at the meeting with PennDOT in October, at which your staff was present, PennDOT is open to different types of restrictions in these situations because, of course, PennDOT is seeing this throughout District 8 ever since they've implemented the new regulations, which restrict points of access onto state roads to 1 point of access for development such as this. It's just something that we're running into ever since this change in District 8, which happened probably about 5 years ago, right? It's a change in their regulations that they're only allowing 1 point of access onto the state highway for safety purposes. There are a lot of municipal regulations that for a development require 2 points of ingress and egress. PennDOT, basically will allow in that situation an emergency access to act as that second point of ingress and egress, and that's what the other municipalities in your county have been doing. So at this point, there we go, there's my guy again. Really, you can get to essentially any one of these, again, dwellings with multiple points of ingress and egress because of, now granted, before this road was constructed, yes, you had a situation where you could be down on this side and not be able to necessarily easily get there from the other side of the development, or the same down on this side. But with the construction of this connection road, it is providing really a good through circulation throughout the development. From a purely legal standpoint, this emergency access acts as a functional equivalent to that subdivision and land development ordinance requirement, and therefore, under the case law, we believe that that modification is appropriate to be granted. Do you have additional questions on that minor modification of the definition of through street that's being requested?
So I don't believe that that's our interpretation of two means of ingress and egress. A knockbox is for emergency access, not for convenience of residents. There are a whole bunch of things that are wrong with this. I disagree with your interpretation of how far back that single point of access affects a development.
Well, certainly under the ordinance as drafted, I don't disagree that your interpretation is correct, that this does not count as 2 points of ingress or egress, or that you are classifying the, that you are measuring the cul-de-sac in the correct manner. What we are saying is that we are entitled to a modification of your ordinance given the restrictions from PennDOT, and that modification is simply to the definition that you have in your ordinance for through street. Through street, that definition of through street is what ultimately dictates how you define the ingress and egress and how you define the measurements for cul-de-sacs. So with that minor modification to the definition of through street, to which we believe we are entitled due to the restrictions from PennDOT, which are outside of the control of the applicant, that with that modification, this then becomes a through street, and if this becomes a through street, that changes then how you measure the cul-de-sacs, and it makes this into then those 2 points of ingress and egress.
So what you're doing is saying that if we change the name on that, the problem goes away. And I am suggesting that the problem does not go away. The condition is the condition, and changing the name of it and allowing it is not in the best interest of the people who will be living in that development and living with this for the rest of the time they own those homes.
So what we've
I have
asked,
a problem with you asking us to just change a name of something so that we can play a game, play a shell game, and say, oh yeah, now it meets it just because we changed the name. That's not the intention of that ordinance.
what we have asked staff before, and we're still kind of waiting for information on, is to understand then exactly how this is not a functional equivalent of what your ordinance would otherwise require, which is the 2 points of ingress and egress. We know that the single access onto Druck Valley Road is acceptable to PennDOT and functions in the future at acceptable level of service A, at all turning movements, level of service A. We are also providing for emergency purposes an emergency access so that if the concern is an emergency, that's specifically what the emergency access is for, and therefore you have the 2 means of ingress and egress the same as you would have if you had full ingress and egress during an emergency. So we have a point of ingress and egress which functions at the highest level, acceptable level of service here, and we also have 2 means of ingress and egress during an emergency, which is what your ordinance requires for emergencies. So we would like to understand how this isn't a functional equivalent of what your ordinance needs for the community.
I think we've been through this ad nauseum. We spent a whole meeting talking through that whole situation, and that's why, you know, we've taken a position on that already. So I'm not sure why you think that we're just going to change our mind, that it's in the best interest of all of those residents to have one access point with 85 houses in a loop that has only one ingress and egress. And you can say, okay, well, there's an emergency Knox box, but there are plenty of things that aren't going to get an emergency responder out there to open that box in any reasonable amount of time. That is not the intent of the ordinance that we've written. There are situations that we have had that I've pointed out in actually multiple times in these meetings in the past. There is a whole section of land behind the York County offices that they tried to say we had 2 points of ingress and egress that were probably similar distances apart, and all of the development back in there, they had no way out the other end. That was turned down by this board. I'm not sure why this is different or better. This is actually more houses. So I guess I'm at a loss to understand why we're having the same argument with no change to the plan.
There is a change to the plan, and that change to the plan allows this full movement.
That was brought to us last time.
There is no other feasible alternative here. PennDOT will not allow, we went back to PennDOT. After the board meeting, we went back to PennDOT to confirm. PennDOT will not allow another means of ingress and egress, and this parcel is otherwise landlocked. And the case law indicates, again, that so long as this is a functional equivalent, and you're talking about the Knox box, I understand that that's what's on there. I asked in correspondence to the township for other alternatives. We asked in a meeting for input from the township on what other alternatives you would like to have. PennDOT suggested other alternatives. We've not received any input from the township on what other alternatives you might like to see. I will note that both your fire chief and your police chief signed off on the Knox box and the emergency access gate almost 2 years ago.
That did not give you the right to use that as the second means of ingress and egress. They can sign off on a Knox box saying it works for their purposes. Sure. That is not the condition that we're looking at.
They looked at that condition and from the emergency services standpoint, signed off on that condition. So, but I am saying if your concern is with the use of a Knox box, there are other alternatives. We're happy and we're welcome to hear what, get that input from the township as to what that might be. The reality is there is no feasible way to have a second means of ingress and egress to this development. PennDOT controls and has sole jurisdiction of this roadway, and they have said no. Twice.
You mentioned that PennDOT has provided you, I guess, with some other alternatives to the Knox box.
Yes.
Is that in what you gave us tonight?
And it was in the meeting minutes from the meeting in October, which staff was at as well. So they specifically mentioned both geotech. So the idea of you use the subsurface geotech with grass, so it looks like grass, but it will support up to a fire engine, fire vehicle. They suggested a chain. I think the chain is kind of a little bit old-fashioned, but that they will do that. I know that there are other things as well that they're open to. They just generally express that if there's something the township wants to do, they'll sit down and talk with the township about it and work with the township to have something that's acceptable. I'd like to turn my attention before, while we still have time, to the amended, I'd say amended soils because we had those, to the loading ratios, and I may need Mr. Wright to speak to this, but just a correction in your plan review. It was not updated to include the revisions that were made with the plan and the resubmission in December. So there was a meeting between the engineers at the beginning of December, and there were changes that were made, including adding amended soils to the basins that reduced the loading ratios, and also maps that were provided to prove that this site is not within the area of karst geology. There were notes that have been added to the plan related to geologist review, and it seems that that was somehow missed in the latest review of the plan set.
Stacy?
Yeah.
Hi, you've done a good job. What I hear, though, is if we're willing to change our definition of what a through street is, this project can move forward.
That's correct.
But we have to change our definition. For me, this is not a through street. This is a big loop that goes from Truck Valley Road down into a development with a lot of cul-de-sacs and back out through the loop to Truck Valley Road. In an emergency situation, there's a secondary means of egress. But it's not a through street. A through street is a through street. I'm sorry, I just don't,
Yep.
I don't see how that works.
Well, and I understand that. Then in the alternative, we're back to the two waiver requests that we, again, are entitled to, which be the waiver from two means of ingress and egress and the waiver from cul-de-sac length. Because again, there's no ability to get that second means of ingress and egress in order to reasonably develop this property in accordance with the zoning ordinance.
I'm going to suggest that we go into executive session for legal discussion.
Okay.
Any problem with that, board members?
I'm fine with that.
Need a recess?
Yes, we're recessing for, we'll be back.
Yeah, recessing for a brief meeting. All right, we all set?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that we table this item until the next meeting to give us adequate time to review the voluminous publication that we got dated January 22nd.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Carries unanimous.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Communication from supervisors. Anyone have anything tonight?
I'll just mention that we had our initial YALFR meeting for 2026 a few nights ago, and one of the discussions on there is a continuation that we deliberately postponed to this year to have further discussion on charter amendment agreements changes. It's different than the ones that are on our agenda tonight. And at some point, some dates will be coming to us for possible meeting date to sit and discuss any potential changes, including, I know you submitted a report before you left last year. As of right now, I think they were looking at sometime in March, but I haven't received any notice of any dates yet, but when I do, I'll share those, so anyone who wants to attend that can do so.
Thank you, George. Anybody else? All right, we'll move on to, I guess, solicitor's report.
I have nothing to add to the report unless anybody has any questions on the report.
Questions for our solicitor? All right, manager's report, Mark.
The only thing I wanted to add to my written report is because of the upcoming snowstorm, I will be declaring a snow emergency at some point this weekend when I know a little more when it's going to start. And then the follow-up to that is it would be in front of the board at the first meeting in February to acknowledge that. And when I stop that event, it'll all be on that meeting. That is all.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, next we have ordinances and resolutions. First is Resolution number 2026-29, amending fee schedule.
Mr. Chairman, the part of the budget process for 2026 is I asked the directors to review all the fees that we charge for various services and to provide a proposed change to the applicable ones. And the majority of those are from the Community Development Department and the Recreation Department. I have reviewed all the proposed changes with each director. Finance Director Jamie Reed has reviewed and met with them as well. I'm glad to take any questions that anyone may have, but I recommend the changes as proposed.
Mark, it's Charles. I did have one technical question. Did we compare ourselves to the neighboring townships? I thought Randall did that. I just wasn't sure where we stacked up relative to all of the fees and relative to nearby townships.
Yep, Randall and Brandy both did comparisons to neighboring townships and townships in the greater York area, municipalities, and will be in line with our neighboring municipalities.
We have motion.
Move to approve Resolution 2026-29.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Carries unanimous. Resolution number 2026-30, authorizing amendments to, these are revisions to Yalford Charter Agreement.
Mr. Chairman, the Chief Hoff forwarded this to me in early December, and the commission, the Yalford Commission, authorized these changes to be sent to each municipal board for review and action. Solicitor.
And the other two charter municipalities have already accepted these.
And so what I wanted to add is the solicitor reviewed these changes and didn't have any concerns with them.
Mr. Chairman, I would move for approval of Resolution 2026-30, authorizing amendments to Article 3, Section B, Article 5, Section B, G, H, I, and K, Article 7, Section C, Article 8, Section A and E of the York Area United Fire and Rescue Commission amended chapter agreement dated October 17th, 2017.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimous. Next, we have resolution number 2026-31, which is cost sharing agreement. That title isn't on here. Actually not seeing the title name all the way out here. Hold it. Utility relocation cost sharing agreement with PennDOT for permanent relocation of Mill Creek Interceptor. That's what I'm looking for.
Mr. Chairman, we've talked about this over the many years. It's finally in its final stages, and PennDOT has issued their typical, they'll pay for 75% of the project, and the township will pay 25% plus any betterment. These costs are in the shared intermunicipal sewer fund. I recommend adoption.
Move for the approval of resolution.
So moved. Sorry.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I assume Don said aye. Carries unanimous. Next, we have Resolution 2026-32, amending designation of depositories adopted on January 5th, 2026.
Move for the adoption of resolution 2026-32 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mark, I abstain.
I vote aye, so 4 and 1 abstention. Anything on old business that we need to bring forward this evening? Hearing none, we are at the end of our agenda. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.